St. Thomas Mount is a quaint hill town towards the south of the city that the British once looked to as a sanatorium, a place to chill out. For Christians, the area held deep religious significance, for it was here that Thomas, one of the 12 apostles of Christ, was believed to have been martyred. When the British came to the Mount, there was already a certain quaintness about it, thanks to the presence of the Portuguese and the Armenians, and they found the garden houses and the pristine air and the European company much to their liking. Before long, around the middle of the 18th century, they set up the Madras Artillery here at the foot of the Mount. In its wake came other regiments, such as the cavalry and the infantry, and facilities for them, such as barracks, firing ranges, a garrison church, an officers' mess, etc., and St. Thomas Mount became a military cantonment, the second oldest in the country. The Officers Training Academy, set up here in 1963, is the premier academy for youngsters wishing to gain entry into the short commissions of the Indian Army. However, much before this time, a substantial Anglo-Indian community flourished at St. Thomas Mount. Their sway continued up to the 1980s, and the approach concourse of the OTA used to be filled with Anglo-Indian boys and girls returning from their hockey games in the Maidan beside the garrison church or the polo grounds, now an army golf course.
During tournaments, we use the armed reserve police ground, or maybe Palavra, or wherever the tournaments were held. Yeah, but most of the time we practiced, the boys from European lines practiced at Garrison Church.
Trevor Ranson remembers the grounds with fondness.
Beautiful ground. But over there, if you slip and fall, because it's hardened mud, you'll scrape your feet, yourself. We didn't have shin guards and knee caps and elbow caps and all, nothing of that sort. So, we used to come from Tamrum, play against Mount, play against Saidapet, Mailapo, Perambo, Roypuram, Georgetown. All these fellows come here to play. But all half an hour in.
We used to play football, hockey, volleyball, you name it. We used to be up for it, very sporty. Well, it's practically everybody in Mount, we just go down the street, high by, made friends with everyone.
But Maidan was like what can I say, like one of the Sahara Desert or something. It was, at that point in time for us, it was so huge. And to go to the other end of the ground was like a curse. So we always used to fight for the place which was behind the war cemetery.
In many ways, St. Thomas Mount was a cradle of hockey, especially women's hockey, helping produce national stars such as Phyllis Huggins, Clara Taylor, and Pam Hayward. Other places such as Perambo, Wepri, and Palavaram also produced such talent, and players like Maggie Mullen, June Mullen, and Marlene Payne too should have been in the Indian team.
We had this ladies hockey team, Perambo Blues. The colors were full blue top and blue shorts, so they called themselves the Perambo Blues. They went to Ceylon. Being railway people, they got free pass from Edinburgh to Dhanushkodi. Dhanushkodi, of course, by boat, they had to buy their tickets.
At one time, there were as many as 5 women's hockey clubs in the city. The Shamrocks, the Penguins, the Falcons from Binnies, the Seagulls, and the Dolphins.
I played hockey for Tamil Nadu, I played hockey for Indian Railways.
Okay. So what about these clubs, Anglo-Indian clubs,
I played for Shamrocks. I played first Shamrock B, then Shamrock A, then Shamrock Stop, then we played for Falcons, Urban Pasai.
Can you tell us some of the Anglo-Indian hockey players who played along with you?
Okay, Phyllis Huggins, Clara Taylor, Audrey Taylor, Michelle Rowland, my daughter, then John Pearl, Pam Tockett, Dotin Island, Gwen from St. Thomas Walker, Jane Walker, Olga Frolic, Rebecca Frolic. Olga was in charge of the Shamrock team.
Barbara Clare's husband, Tristram, also coached a couple of teams.
Penguins and some others. He used to go straight from Binnies from work in the evening, 4 o'clock he used to break off. and he'd go and take the girls' teams.
The teams were completely Anglo-Indian, as other Indian women were yet to really enter the fray. In the past, here at St. Thomas Mount, the army would sometimes host fancy fetes for civilians at the polo grounds, and the Rudra and North Parade roads would be filled with Anglo-Indian choral groups serenading during Christmas. This is a view of the Mount from the intersection of these two roads in the 1960s, and the view as it is today. Urbanization has taken its toll. We spoke to Ian Hart, who had emigrated to the United States in 1983.
Everything was so different. It was quiet, it was clean. You saw a lot of people always dressed up nicely. You didn't see buffalo, the cows on the main roads. And the roads look narrower now than it used to be. More traffic than it used to be in those days. And it was a great town, as I say.
A quaint hill town with always a guitar and a song.
The music, dancing, and it was big families, and even though we had big families, our houses were open to everyone. It's like all other friends and everyone just walk into our house, and they join in with the celebrations and make it very enjoyable. It's like a party the whole day, an open house and party the whole day long for Christmas.
Actually, my first instrument I learned to play was the harmonica. When my brother passed away, I was very young, and then Alan McPherson taught me, drew the diagram of the scale, taught me how to play it. That distracted my mind, and then I learned to play the guitar by ear. I used to play a few chords. Then I went to St. Bede's and I joined the band, and I used to play the clarinet.
Adrian works for Australia Post at the Dandenong Mail Centre and teams up with other Anglo-Indian colleagues to make Harmony Day special.
The spearhead of our band is Nate Laurent, who incidentally has a band at Melbourne called Next Generation.
The Next Generation, of course, has been the most popular Anglo-Indian band in Melbourne. But let's bring the focus back to Mount.
A lot of what St. Thomas Mount reminds me of is a lot of tolerance. We thought that we Anglos were different. The first time I noticed that was when I actually went to school outside of St. Thomas Mount. So I think my fondest memories of St. Thomas Mount was just a community where a lot of different people were accepted for who they are.
Oh yes, we used to run up the hill, catch kites, crawl down it. And there was more hill than houses at the time. Even the streets there were a lot of just single houses, whereas now it's all high-rise houses, high-rise flats. It's a shame that the town is losing its charm in the name of progress and development. So hopefully someone will come along and put a stop to it, otherwise it'll be overcrowded. And it's so busy now with all even St. Patrick's Church Road used to be a residential area. There's now seems a motorway, not a highway.
And yes, memories of St. Patrick's Third Lane are huge, and there's nothing that I can say can ever be a bad memory as such. It starts off firstly with the first time we wanted to build our house on that street itself, and the only place that existed was the White House of Chennai, which was your own house, and we built our house over there back in '87.
The immediate neighbor was Mrs. Beatrice Francis, and her two children, Glenn and Glinda. And then behind was Mrs. Whiteley, Terence Whiteley and his wife Cordell. And then behind the Vincent de Paul home was Captain Narendran. And further down would have been the Shetliers and Dr. Eastwood. and the rings in front of the first lane.
Okay. And I mean, a second lane, further down a second lane, who stayed?
Further down our second lane would have been Hennigans, who passed away, and then Captain Thurley and Margaret Peters, and then there was a little space there where we used to play volleyball or whatever, and hockey a little bit. And then Merlin Thomas was there, and at the back of them were the Rosiers, Derek and his wife.
And also the Menzies, I'm told.
Menzies, yes, Jimmy Menzies and his brother Alex and his mother.
And the Garretts, where did the Garrett stay?
Garrett stayed, earlier Garrett, yes, Garrett stayed in the house where Merlin Thomas shifted into later.
Most of the old houses have given way to modern monsters, and the charm of the town is long gone.
And you go back to see this area, which is unrecognizable. It's just densely populated, and the constructions that are there have all been, not beautiful constructions. It looks hideous. There is no ventilation. The hill, which is the natural, rock and stone and such a thing of beauty, has been completely chopped off, and there's no visibility of the hill. And it's amazing. I couldn't recognize the area. It's really very sad.
Some properties, such as these, have been under dispute or litigation. Hardly a handful remain, such as Rogerton House, now owned by the Sukumar family, the Dawson House belonging to Margaret Dawson, a portion of Rosemary Cottage belonging to Sharon Ring, who is settled in Faroe Islands, and this former home of Mr. Sam Hart, now an upmarket cafe. We sprang a surprise visit on Austin McItish, a tenant in a 130-year-old house. The house was reportedly given by a European to his domestic help, who in turn has given it over to a temple trust. The tiles appear untouched for decades and looks like home to some Anglo-Indian insects. Some of the bigger bungalows, such as those belonging to the Bamfords or the McKinnons, were well known as venues for house parties.
A lot of that used to be run by one Joe Kelly, down the Patrick's Church Road, right to the last building. They used to have a lot of dances over there, Trevor Royal was another person that lived in Mount, close to us. He used to run dances too. And we used to have a good time, Everybody was there. All the different dances you'll be seeing.
So mostly the Anglo-Indians, we would get together and have housey and whist and cards and little social gatherings, little dances.
Okay.
And we used to have good bands that we used to hire, and it was good.
We used to have dances very often. In the first St. Patrick's Church, there was a house at the end, King's house, and he was incidentally the president of the Anglican Association, Mr. King, and they used to have dances there, ever so often, organized every month, I think, and it was pretty good.
Did you attend these dances?
I just went for one when I would have been about 15, 16 at that time, and we had the whole crowd of, let's say, Brenda Munro. She married Bruce Fraser, so Brenda and Bruce, and then the Marshalls, Willie Marshall and Rita and his wife, and then his brother Richard Marshall and Beverly Marshall with Althea Ring and Pletters.
A lot of pound parties at what's his name, who lived opposite the church. Alan's house. We used to come to.
Some of the big dances were in the Lawrence's house and the Rings house. They used to always have these jam sessions, and later on even Auntie Merlin used to have some get-togethers at her house. But it was always around, we used to find excuses to have get-togethers. There was the May Queen and the June Rose Ball and the Spring Dance and something else. But we used to have lots of socials.
Yes, honey and candy and lolita, all of us can never ever forget the amount of dances that we went to, which were every time a success. It could be at Boyo's house, or it could be at Pradeep's house, or at Brian's house, or even at your place, but it was always a success and was fun. We've never had a fight that I remember in Mount, but if we had to go to Palabram or Perambur, it was a different story.
There was a girl called Coral Lazaro, and we used to have a lot of programs there. Or in the parish hall, we used to get together and have jam sessions where we used to dance, like in the afternoon or even after the amateur sessions were over. But what stands out in my mind is I had a neighbor, and her name was Zina. And we used to get together at home in my place and play the music from childhood. And we just used to enjoy dancing together. Both of us would just play the music and dance and dance and dance. I think that's where my love for dancing started.
Or Chand Complex.
Okay.
Kings used to be there only.
No, that's the D'Souza's used to stay there. The Kings were down St. Patrick's. So during their time, they used to have dances there. Kings.
Okay.
That's where a lot of fights took place.
Oh, okay. And the O'Keeffes?
Yeah, they were all St. Patrick's.
What were the O'Keeffes?
Talking about 1960s.
60s. What were the O'Keeffes known for?
They were.
Who
used to work for the airline? Used to work for the airline.
Yeah.
Mr. O'Keeffe was in the airline, and she was Italian. Mrs. O'Keeffe was Italian.
Perhaps the only bungalow that is still maintained and inhabited by an Anglo-Indian family is that of the late Mrs. Gwen Gamble. She was 85 years of age with a fairly good memory when we interviewed her in mid-2016.
I'm born 1930 and I lived all my life more or less in St. Thomas's Mount. My father was in Orissa. He worked as Inspector of Police. Then he was transferred down to the south.
Her grandfather was Scottish and stationed at St. Thomas Mount in the 1870s.
He retired from the army as a gunner. And he used to fire the gun on the hill at 6 in the morning and 6 in the evening.
Every day?
Yes, every day.
I asked her if anything had changed in Mount.
In my day, we moved around without fear because things were simple. My grandchildren, my great-grandchildren, I often fear for them because we walked about at even midnight with no problems. All these streets more or less were all with Anglo-Indian families, but now it's like finding a needle in a haystack.
Can you tell us how you met your husband?
Well, my husband was actually, his mother and my mother were very, very close friends. And of course, I was teaching at that time and he was working, and then they lived in Pudapet. And then they moved to St. Thomas Mount. And I remember we lived in a house on Silver Street. And he and his brother used to walk up and down the road singing songs because we had a lot of girls in the family.
Myself and we had Don Saro, were always altar boys. Don Saro found his life partner serving from the altar, which was Cheryl Persich. So
St. Thomas Mount was a pensioners' paradise for Britishers, but later on occupied by the Anglo-Indians. But now it is more Indian dominated. 90% of the Anglo-Indians have left, gone abroad, mostly to Australia, and just a few old people are left back behind or on the verge of death.
everything seems to be the same, and especially when people come down from Australia, it's even more better because we have 90% of Mount in Melbourne now.
See, St. Thomas Mount goes way back with me because Uncle Herman who used to live there, all my cousins, David, Roger and Charlotte, who I visited now in Texas, and the Smiths lived next to the Rings place, and then it was after them was my uncle's house, and they left in the late 70s to the US, and ever since then there was this attachment to St. Thomas Mount.
There was one First Holy Communion, like we had for my First Holy Communion, two of my cousins, Penny and Roger Daniel and Penny Thomas, all three of us did our First Holy Communion on the same day. So we had breakfast at my house, lunch, I think it was at the Daniels house, and dinner at Thomas's. So it was a whole day of partying in Mount from one house to the other. We all went.
The homes of the Smiths, the Wilkins, the Daniels, and even the Fernandes of Alandur, once sprawling bungalows, are now multi-storied apartments. These bungalows have produced enormous talent. Merlin Smith Thomas has authored a cookbook. Her daughter Penny Fernandes is exceptional with cakes and desserts. Duncan Wilkins and Percy Lobo have been ace choir masters, while Ozzie Fernandes has been one of India's top human rights activists. Mrs. Adrian Hanrahan's kindergarten school at Gopalapuram near Church Park and Mrs. Florence Lippert's middle school at Porur have been popular neighborhood schools.
What about Mrs. Whiteley and Mr. Whiteley?
They were my grandmom's best friends, and Christmas will never go by without Mrs. Whiteley's fruitcake or the wine. They were a very happy couple. They were there down the second main road.
Next to the Whiteleys was a transvestite affectionately called Bertie.
We did tease him. That's why we kept saying that's one line, Bertie, Bertie, your bum is dirty kind of a thing. But he was again one of God's chosen ones, I guess.
Used to dress colourfully
Very
with the
colourfully,
umbrella.
very colourfully, and the umbrellas always used to match.
Milton also fondly recalled the Hanrahans.
Oh, what a voice they had. Uncle Hanrahan and Wayne and his elder brother as well. All of them had such brilliant voices, and it was something else. And they had one daughter, if I remember right.
Kelly.
Yeah, and they are all gone away as well. So that's the thing, the flavor of Mount slowly moved away when everybody else thought that it's better out there, because if only they had to wait a little longer, they would have seen the actual Chennai or the Madras, the actual Madras take shape.
India has its values of love and affection and gratitude and camaraderie and whatever you call it, but Australia is more, you have the openness there, the fresh air that you breathe, you can go for long walks, long walkways, and drive on the freeways at 100 an hour, which I think here only in the country you would dream of.
Not all in the community were well off, to say the least.
Then later on I joined the Mount Catholic Association with Rudy and Brenda Ring and Kenny and myself, Kenneth Chester and Marley Highland, my sister-in-law, and we did a lot of social work for the poor Anglo-Indians. And we started this service of giving them a hamper at Christmas time for all the poor families who couldn't afford to have a meal on Christmas Day.
This tradition of helping fellow Anglo-Indians in distress continues to this day, not just in Mount, but in other areas as well. Tina fondly remembers the Anglo-Indian nun, Sister Jane.
Sister Jane and I used to come to the patches, as they call them now, by the cemetery, and we used to go and try to bring the parents back to church.
Christy Desjardins recalls acting in the Passion play at St. Patrick's Church.
And it was conducted by a very popular couple called Andrea, Mr. and Mrs. Moss. I can't get her husband's name. Mr. and Miss Moss, now both of them are in Australia. And they did all the expenditure and they made this a beautiful passion play. They got all the facilities possible, everything, the costumes, the designing, the artwork, everything they paid for, cameras, everything. And that play came up very, very beautifully, and I played the role of Pontius Pilate.
He remembers how the English Mass used to be a predominantly Anglo-Indian affair. So much has changed now.
That Anglo-Indian community assembling for the English service every Sunday is totally out of the question today. We never find that at all. And even the English services are all converted into Tamil today. The midnight mass for Christmas and New Year will always be at 9 o'clock when it's supposed to be at 11 o'clock.
St. Patrick's Church was famous across the city for its English choir.
So very fond memories of our Mount choir is always there. People always want to go to Mount because the choir is so good. And the times we used to go for carol singing. Christmas is coming up close right now. And going to Defence Colony, traveling about for our choir picnics.
We used to take a carol singing group every year in December, and then the proceeds which were at that time almost negligible, but we would go up the hill and give it to Sister, it was Thompson, Sheila Thompson. Now she's in Australia at the moment, and she was in charge of the creche at the top of the hill.
Was she an Anglo-Indian?
She was Australian. She's in Melbourne now.
The convent on the hilltop has been doing commendable work taking care of abandoned babies.
They used to have often babies sometimes at the bottom of the hill steps, being kept there and by the parents, and they would desert them, and then these nuns would come and pick them up and take them up to the orphanage and look after them. And they used to get them even jobs when they grew up and get them married.
Opposite St. Patrick's Church stands the vacant home of Denzel and Alan de Cruz.
Very nice going to, because he had such a huge heart. He used always, though his son was not keeping too well, he always opened his doors for us to come and practice till late in the night, and Gail always was there for us, and along with his brother. So it was, we were never like strangers, and that's why Mount has such a lot of fond memories.
We spoke to Alan, who has been the community's most popular MC in Madras and is now in Melbourne.
We started MCing just to give something back to the community. We started doing it for people who were really finding it hard to organize their weddings. So that's what we stepped into, doing things right from India. 1978 was my first wedding. And after that, just didn't stop. I thought I'd do it just for a few times and then it stopped. We put heart and soul into it and it went very well. And then people started recognizing that. So there we give time. It's much more long drawn than India. It takes a lot of work, so it's much more work, but I like doing it.
Anglo-Indian weddings are considered a delight to behold.
Our weddings are much, much better than the white men's weddings. For them it's just get married in the church, say cheers, and then start a couple of tosses and throwing glasses over shoulders, enjoying the wedding just by, chit-chatting and having a good drink, having a good meal. But our weddings are a lot of fun, We have lots of dancing, we have amazing bands. So they enjoy the culture when they see it.
What about the Grand March?
They never do a Grand March. For them, Grand March, we have to teach them what a Grand March is. But our Anglo-Indians are way up on Grand Marches, and they enjoy the Grand March. They've never seen it before, although it hails from British.
Alan's wife, Gail, was Protocol Secretary to the US Consul General in Madras for many years.
Gail joined the consulate here as well as she joined the consulate back in Australia. But more fond memories are here in India, where they had a very good group of Anglo-Indians. And I remember starting up earlier was Mrs. Hilal, Anne Hilal and Herman Daniels.
Several Anglo-Indians have, over the years, served with the American, British and other diplomatic missions in the city.
And they fared very, very well. They always stood up to the challenge and did their job very well, and they were appreciated by most of the consul generals, by the ambassadors' wives who came along. So they were appreciated very much. Gail, for one, was a stalwart, and all her experience that she put in here when she went to Australia, they just grabbed her and said, "Where were you all these years? We didn't find a person like you."
The European lines, misspelt as Lane, was a buzz of Anglo-Indian activity, but now only 3 or 4 families remain.
We stayed in European line, which is Hillside Lane. Yeah, great place. Still have very good memories of. It's changed. My old house is not there anymore, but I still miss that side of town.
Some areas have changed a lot. Where we used to live, it's all completely gone. Few houses there, like where the Hilliers lived, or where the Swells lived. They're all the same. Where the Meagher are living is the same. They haven't moved or changed at all.
During yesteryears, Mount was very green, clean and serene. Anglo-Indian and other children freely ran up and down the hill. We spoke to Ann Toner, who grew up in European lines.
So we had these spacious maidans or grassy fields, and you had the hill rising above that, and it was just beauteous. It was just nature in all its glory and splendor. And it was so pristine, So when you woke up in the morning, you would see the mist rolling off the rocks, and you would have this greenery around. It was conducive to everything that was healthy. So we used to run up and down as the hills and up over the rocks, and that's where I think I got all my tomboyishness and all the muscle strength and things like that to continue with this career, which is what developed me, allowed me to develop my skills.
Fly kites, I used to run up the hill almost every morning. I used to go, to the church on top there. I was an altar boy there. So I did everything, and playing tops, playing Gillian Dandu with the Tamilian boys.
How did you go up the hill?
I used to go to the shortcut behind our house. Used to run up the hill. It was very easy to run up the hill those days.
We climbed up through all different paths, all over everywhere, through the steps, from the road, through the rocks.
We have very fond memories of Meadow Street because all our childhood memories of playing police and robbers on the street with all the local families around. We used to do kite flying from the rooftops and...
You flew kites?
I used to try, but I used to get stranded on one of the walls. My brothers used to make it up to the roof, but I used to sort of go halfway. But they used to use Mum's nice grinding stone to grind glass pieces for manja, and then they used to all get told off, my brothers, Morris and Stephen.
Don Claudius, Parrish, Lester, all of them used to fly either from the beginning of the hill steps or from the old post office. From there, Samson Sharma and all that from Butt Lane. We used to fly from our house. Peter De Cruz, they used to fly from their place. Then Casey's, Kabu Casey, all of them, they used to fly from the top of the hill. And actually on top of the hill also by Shane's place, there was one particular rock with one hole in it to put the ball of thread in. Everybody used to go and fight for that one place. That was the time. Now we don't even get kites to fly because it's banned.
Telling me something about the Koilos.
Yeah, Koilo, Dougie Koilo and all that. They used to sit from their steps and try to shoot the kite with the air gun. Then that side was Tide and Latimer.
And where you all bought your kites from?
We had one man in Fisherman Street. Then we had another Sampath. Right, he was staying at the side of Davy's house.
You all didn't make your own kites, huh?
We used to make, most of us used to make our own kites, but it was easier to go and buy it. At that time, kites were cheap. 1 rupee was a full sheet, they call it the Bana kites or the big full sheet kite, right? That was, the smallest kites were only 5 paisa, 10 paisa one kite.
We used to go up to the hill plateau which used to be there and fly a lot of kites with friends like Raphael Lawrence, and then we had Calvin De Silva and Brian Thomas and other people who were... Sandy Hilal, yes, who can forget Sandy Hilal? Sandy Hilal, and we used to also go to play in Nevin Narona's place and fly kites out of there.
My sister, when she came from Canada, she made me buy about 2 dozen kite sheets of paper and this chain mark, Changli mark, it is yet there, Madurai coats. 8 coats that thread. I bought about 3,000 meters, and of course you can't get that powder, that manja powder, that glass powder. Before they used to sell it, 30 rupees a kilo. When I came here initially, I put about 4,000 yards of manja. But today, because it's banned, they stopped flying kite.
We had a lot of Anglo-Indians staying around us at that time, and we were all a big group, and we would go out to play all these different games and cycle around and sprint around and play all the hide and seek games, and it was really a wonderful experience.
I remember this game where you had like 2 little sticks, one small stick.
Gilly and Dun.
That's it. Where you hit one and it goes up, and then you have to whack it.
Yeah.
You used to make it fun. I used to try it, be good at it. And there's another one. We used to just make do with whatever little toys we could make up. I mean, I remember my cousin Brian. He just had like a tube, a tyre, and we used to whack it and run down the road with it. That was our little fun.
St. Patrick's Church compound was really a massive compound. At that time, the St. Louis, which is now the novitiate, was not existent at that time. And we used to play, and we had a lot of these bushes around, these Antigonian bushes and all that sort of stuff. And I was an altar boy, so when we went down there with the boys, And then we peeped through the bushes and there were huge cans of illicit liquor, addict, what they used to make. And then we informed the priest and they came and I think he informed the police and they confiscated everything. And we used to play 7 tiles, a game called 7 tiles. Build up 7 tiles with a rubber ball and knock it off and then run between, make some runs and sort of thing. Well, I had Owen Lobo for one, and Ronnie De Silva, then Carlton Fernandez, and Charlie Harvey was another boy. Studied with us in the St. Dominic's Convent. At that time we could study only till the 4th standard and then we went into school. I moved into St. Bede's and Derek Tellis, Keith Tellis.
So who were your friends in St. Thomas Mount? You used to come there often.
Yeah, Morris, Randy Huggins, Rudy, Rosario, Kevin Pinto, Raul Rosario, Parish Claudius, Farouk, poor chap, may his soul rest in peace.
Only Parish Claudius and Kevin Pinto have remained in Mount. Parish remembers the girls of European Lines, some of whom played hockey.
There were Donna Houghton, Jackie Davy, then the De Silva girls, Sandra, Andrea, Lauren used to come around then.
We caught up with one of them.
I love to play with the boys more because my brothers also were there and I learned from them actually to be tough. My brother Raymond and Adolf used to take me to the grounds and play, and then after that I joined Charlie Huggins put me on to the Tamil Nadu coach. I was selected for the state team and then made it to play for Tamil Nadu state.
Okay, when
1980.
1980. So were there any other Anglo-Indian girls playing for Tamil Nadu?
Yeah, that was that Kerina De Silva. She was also with me, my group. I remember her very well.
The freedom was there. We were able to run, climb the hill, go fishing, go to the river, and all those sort of things. So that was a nice thing, that community spirit.
Oh, you all went fishing?
Yeah, the river, behind the hill. I don't know what it's called.
Battery River.
Battery River, is it? Okay.
We used to go down to the river with, they're in Brisbane, Douglas, Lazaro and Cordell, the whole family, Shireen and then Georgie. And they used to catch snakes. And so did my brother-in-law, Michael Shafton. He used to catch snakes. And they used to go and give all the snakes to, what's his name? Whitaker, Romulus Whitaker, who runs the snake farm and the crocodile.
For decades, the European Lines has played host to a colony of milkmen who remember the community with fondness.
பால் அந்த காலத்தில் அப்போலாம் இங்கே பழைய வீடு நிறைய வீடுங்க இருந்தப்போ சிக்கமன் காலையில் வெளில போனால் 6 மணி 5 மணிலாம் போய் பாட்டு தான் இருக்கும் ரோடு தெருப்புறா இங்கிலீஷ் மியூசிக் தான் போடும் அப்போலாம் அது சண்டே சாட்டர்டேனாக்கா ஒரு ஃபுல்லாக தான் இருக்கும் பிஸியாக இருக்கும் எனி டைம் இந்த இங்கிலீஷ் பாட்டு தான் இருக்கும் தெருவே இதாக இருக்கும் அதுதான் அந்த காலத்தில் ஆங்கிலேயன் சட்டக்காரத்து இருந்தாக்கா சட்டக்காரன் ஃபேமஸ் அப்போ வீட்டுங்களா வேலை செய்கிறவங்க கொள்றவங்களாம் இப்போ இருக்கும் நல்லா இது ஜாலியாக இருக்கும் அப்போ கிறிஸ்மஸ் ஆனால் நிறைய திங்ஸ்லாம் கொடுப்பாங்க அப்போ எங்கே போனால் அந்த கருப்பு காப்பி ஃபேமஸ் அப்போ கருப்பு காப்பி தான் ஃபேமஸ் சட்டக்காரத்தில் கருப்பு காப்பி இப்போ ஒன்றுமே ஆங்கிலேயன் கிடையாது இப்போ சுத்தமாக இப்போ
The milkmen even figured in Anglo-Indian ghost stories.
We had a milkman that used to come 6 o'clock in the morning and tap at the back door, because we had a little courtyard in the back door. And tap at the back door and shout at Mom. So one night she got up on Mom, and my dad said, "Where are you going?" She said, "Oh, the milkman's come. I can hear him banging on the door." And I said, "No." And again the clock struck exactly 12. When I said, "It's 12 o'clock in the night, no milkman's coming."
I had a word with Margaret Dawson, who was born in a vale, lives by herself, and says she is used to seeing spirits about the house.
Normally it's someone who asks for prayers. I see a figure and I ask them in the name of God what I could do for them. And they answer. Maybe sometimes you don't hear them, but you'll get a name registered and you pray for them. Usually they don't harm.
Oh yeah.
Sometimes you'll see someone rushing through the house. You follow up and you see that it's someone standing over there waiting for something. And you've never seen before.
So do they say something to you? Do they talk to you or do you reply?
They don't talk really. just that they want prayers and they tell you, I need a rosary or I need masses, pray for me. And they tell you again.
And we're good storytellers. You know, we've got stories, whether they be religious stories or stories of our upbringing here in India, ghost stories, whatever it is. We're good at sitting around and you know, shooting the breeze in a way that keeps everyone captivated.